the air in our city leads to thousands of premature deaths. It leads to children having stunted lungs forever. It leads to adults having a whole host of health issues, from asthma to cancer, from heart disease to dementia. And it's the poorest parts of our city who are least likely to own a car who suffer the worst consequences caused by air pollution. And so our policies, for me, are not just an issue of addressing the air pollution crisis, they're an issue of social justice.
Hi, I'm Philippa Nuttall, Environment Editor at the New Statesman, and today I'm at Cop26 in Glasgow, where I'm interviewing the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan was recently elected as chair of C40 Cities. C40 Cities is a network of 97 cities around the world which are working together to find solutions to climate change. Hi Sadiq.
And thank you for speaking to me today.
Pleasure.
And congratulations on your appointment as chair of C40 Cities.
So firstly, perhaps you can explain what your main achievements as Mayor of London in terms of making London a green city.
Well, one of the things that we've done in London over the last 5 years that I'm incredibly proud of is in a non-patronising way, educate Londoners about the twin challenges of climate change and the air pollution crisis. And we needed to do that because we're taking bold steps, and we need the permission of Londoners to take those bold steps. So it's a bold step to have the world's first ultra-low emission zone. But we needed to explain to Londoners that the reason why we're doing this is because this air that we breathe every day, within it are invisible killers, the NOx, nitrogen dioxide, the particulate matter, and so forth. And that was really important. And we've now expanded that ULEZ 18-fold last week, covering 4 million people, twice the size of Paris. Incredibly proud of, just in 2 years, pre the pandemic, we managed to reduce the toxic air in the centre of our city by 50%, reduction of NOx by 44%, particulate matter by 27%, carbon emissions by 6%. And so a number of things we've done in this area of climate change and air pollution I'm incredibly proud of. Climate change, we've got the most electric buses of any city in Western Europe, going from almost zero. A third of our taxis are now electric. A third of the country's electric vehicle charging points are in London. We've got the largest number of rapid charging points of any city in Europe. We've set up green academies to train up young Londoners to have the skills for the jobs of tomorrow. So I'm proud of the start we've made.
You said at the C40 City event this morning that lofty mid-century targets won't deliver on climate action. So what kind of targets do cities need? Do they need interim targets around 2030, or do they need very specific sectorial targets around electric vehicle charging points, for example?
You know, somebody far wiser than me said not too long ago that if the 19th century was about empires, the 20th century about nation states, the 21st century is about cities and mayors. And why do I think that's so profound? Is because the UN tells us that more than half of the world's population lives in cities. That's going to go up to 2/3 in the next 20 years. But mayors and cities are really nimble and pragmatic at action for a variety of reasons, not least because we don't have the bureaucracy often that governments have. My concern about these lofty targets, 2050, 2070, 2040, even 2035 is many of us may not be around, let alone in the jobs we're doing, right? So how do you measure how successful we've been? And so mayors are in the now business, doing things now to solve the problems of now and tomorrow. So for example, in London, we improved the quality of air by 50% within 2 years. And we've got, really stretching targets in the next 3 years of my mayoralty. And as far as being the chair of C40 is concerned, us representing more than 700 million people, a quarter of the global economy, we're in the now business. So that means from now, making sure that the next year, 2/3 of our budget goes to the global south. That means now making sure that we use the expertise we've got in London through Breathe London to have almost 100 cities benefiting from our air quality plans. That means now using the framework that we've got for a Green New Deal to help cities have a green recovery. Actually, I feel really awful using the word opportunity when it comes to this pandemic, but it provides us with an opportunity to make sure we don't go back to business as usual, but there's a green recovery. I'll give you one example. We used the opportunity of the pandemic and lockdown to get our teams out to increase 5-fold the amount of cycle lanes in London. When I became mayor, it was 50 kilometres. It's now more than 250 kilometres. And we need cities across the globe to be ensuring we have a green recovery using the opportunity provided by this pandemic to make sure that we invest in Green New Deals.
Clearly, climate action can only be delivered at a city level if the financing is there to do so, and yet the UK government and governments around the world have reduced funding for local authorities. What power do you have as a mayor to make the argument that this funding needs to increase?
Look, one of the things that joins Andy Burnham, Steve Rotherham, Marvin Rees, Andy Street and others, Tracy Brabin, at the hip with me is our call for more powers and resources to devolve from Whitehall to cities and regions across the country. Not only do I think London deserves more devolution of powers and resources, I think Manchester, Liverpool, Bristol, West Yorkshire, Scotland, Wales and so forth need more powers and resources devolved. If taking back control is to be meaningful, it's got to be taking back control so communities have the resources. And local authorities over the last 11 years have, the context is we're the most centralised democracy in the Western world, right? Councils rely upon a large part of their income from central government. Most councils have lost more than 50% of their incomes over the last 11 years. It's not possible for councils by themselves in that environment to be invested in things when they're having to, stretch the pound to keep libraries open or to support social care and so forth. So what I don't want to do is take powers away from local authorities. We're supporting local authorities. We've got a coalition of willing to, we where we can, use the limited resources we have to help communities in relation to councils who want to have safe cycling, councils who want to work with their schools to have school streets, councils who want to plant trees, councils want to work with us to make sure there's more solar on public buildings, councils want to work with us to make sure we invest in retrofitting council homes. So it's us helping councils do more, at the same time lobbying the government to give us and councils more in London, but also across the country.
You talk a lot about social justice and the importance of social justice in terms of climate action. The UK government and some press in the media have a tendency to talk about climate action as a kind of class war. And so at a city level, how, working in a very multicultural, mixed city like London, do you make the argument that climate action is for everybody and that everybody will be able to afford an electric vehicle or to insulate their home?
Yeah, look, so I used to be a lawyer, and when I was a lawyer, what I did was use evidence plus my values to try and win cases for my clients, and the evidence is clear. The air in London, and it's the same for all cities across our country and across the globe, you can't see the smog, or as you could in the 50s. The air looks okay, but there are invisible killers in that air. And we've done a lot of air quality monitoring across our city, and what we know is that the air in our city leads to thousands of premature deaths, it leads to children having stunted lungs forever, it leads to adults having a whole host of health issues from asthma to cancer, from heart disease to dementia. And it's the poorest parts of our city who are least likely to own a car who suffer the worst consequences caused by air pollution. Ella, Kissy, Deborah, the 9-year-old girl, the poor child who lost her lives, and Rosman's been a great campaigner. The coroner in that inquest, the second inquest which we supported the family to get, said that air pollution was a material contributory factor in her death. And so our policies, for me, are not just an issue of addressing the air pollution crisis, they're an issue of social justice. The expanded ultra-low emission zone, 6 out of 10 people who live in the expanded area don't even own a car. Some research that the previous mayor undertook, which was never published until I became mayor, shows that there are 458 schools in areas where the area is unlawful. Those schools are in deprived communities. So it's really important to me to make sure that the those with the broader shoulders carry the greatest burden, and that goes even further towards the global north versus the global south. The other thing I did today was say 2/3 of the C40 budget should go towards helping the global south. We're responsible in the global north for the carbon emissions being at the level they are, right? The Industrial Revolution began actually in Glasgow and across our country, right? Wouldn't it be great if we were the cities and parts of the world which provided the glimmer of hope and the solutions?
And it's one thing to talk about air pollution, which is great and clearly needs tackling, but obviously there's a whole swathe of issues in terms of income levels. So, for example, decarbonising homes or access to an electric vehicle. Are there measures that mayors can take at a local level to help that everybody's brought along with much more than just air pollution?
Well, let's just deal with homes. So in London, there are 750,000 homes that are social homes, social rent homes, right? 3.4 million out of the 3.5 million homes in London. Our policies, and we need governments to help scale this up, of what I call a retrofit revolution, is about insulating these homes. why is that important? Because that will lead to less greenhouse emissions, but also cheaper bills for those families to pay as well. But also, by us investing in this, we're skilling up and training the people in those homes to have these jobs going forward, the fitters, the insulators, those who retrofit these homes. And that's why we're investing in green academies to give Londoners the skills for the jobs of tomorrow. So it's a virtuous circle. You reduce greenhouse emissions. Those who are low-income families get cheaper bills, really, really important, but also they get the skills for high-skilled, well-paid, future-proof jobs. What we can't do is have a transition that's not just. That means the state's got to step in to support a just transition, but also we've got to leverage in the private sector. I'm somebody who passionately believes in a partnership between the public sector and private sector. We have in London some remarkably brilliant businesses helping create wealth and prosperity, but doing it in a way that's supporting the planet. So they can help. For example, we've got a Green Finance Institute working towards leveraging money from the private sector to support this agenda. We've, in the last 5 years since I've been mayor, divested our pensions away from fossil fuels and invested in renewables. And that sort of initiative, public-private, is really important.
You mentioned the green economy and that London's green economy is growing. Can you explain a bit more exactly what you mean by the green economy and how many jobs you expect to be in those industries? And perhaps you could explain a little bit more about a green academy, what exactly it is. And then also in terms of this idea of skilling up, what else is happening to make sure, because there is a massive dearth at the moment of people working in construction, of heat engineer pumps across the UK.
One of the things that I welcome the government doing was devolve to London the adult education budget. It's more than £300 million. And what we've been doing is working with the FE sector, the further education sector, and employers and communities to make sure that the FE sector are providing the skills communities need for the jobs being created. And one of the growing sectors in London, future-proof jobs, well-paid jobs, is in the green economy. Think about those who do the insulation, those that retrofit the homes, those who fit the solar panels, those that make sure we have an electric vehicle charging point infrastructure across our city, those that build the buses, the taxis, those involved in green finance. And so the idea of the academies, we've got a number of academies, 5 in future-proof sectors, is to give Londoners the skills for the jobs that are being created. And at the moment, our green economy is worth £48 billion a year in London. There are more than 300,000 people employed in the green economy. I want to double that over the next 8 years by giving Londoners the skills for the jobs of tomorrow, but also attracting employers to London. I want London to be a high-skilled, well-paid city and a green city as well.
And do you find at the moment, I mean, you obviously have a very green agenda, but at the same time there's the Silvertown tunnel being built. There are other initiatives which are keeping people on the roads and which seem to perhaps sometimes go against the green agenda. How difficult is it to stick to that sort of low-carbon agenda as mayor?
Well, I'm the first green mayor London's ever had. Right? We have, because of my policies, reduced the amount of vehicles coming into central London by on average 24,000 fewer vehicles a day. The reality is you can't escape the fact we've got Victorian infrastructure that is not fit for purpose in the 21st century. So the Black Wall Tunnel, which serves southeast London, is a tunnel built 150 years ago. It's a tunnel that's built, that's bent, because in the days it was built, horses would bolt if they saw daylight too soon, right? It closes on average 700 times a year. A 5-minute delay leads to a 3-mile tailback. The least reliable bus is the single-decker bus that goes to the Black Wall Tunnel. As a consequence of the congestion, there's poor quality, poisonous air in that part of London. So my solution is not to allow gridlock to continue leading to congestion and poor quality air, but to have a new tunnel, the Silvertown tunnel, which will have 2 lanes reserved for double-decker buses, zero carbon, 37 per hour, taking people from one side of the river to the other side. That will be in the expanded ultra-emission zone, which I brought in last week, paying a toll. And all the modelling done by independent experts shows this is carbon friendly and air quality friendly, and it's an example of pragmatism with a solution that's a green solution.
So now as head of C40 Cities, what would you really like to achieve? I mean, there are lots of different initiatives you've set out, but what do you see as the real, at the end of your term, you'd like to say, this is what we achieved?
Look, if it's a 2-year term, I want to sprint for the entire 2 years. What I'm not willing to do is kick the can down the road to 2050, 2045, 2040. So I've already announced today, day one of the job, 3 big things. One is we want the policies we had in London, Breathe London, the biggest air quality monitoring system in the world, to be spread to 100 cities, Breathe Global. The second thing we're going to do is to make sure that 2/3 of the C40 budget goes to the global south. It's really important that those are the broadest shoulders carry the greatest burden, but we help the global south in relation to solutions. And the third thing is we want the framework of a Green New Deal to be replicated across C40 cities with investment backing up a Green New Deal. We want green recoveries in those cities.
You've mentioned the need to increase citizen involvement in the decisions that are made at the level of cities on climate action so that everybody's on board and everybody's brought along. Do you think there needs to be more citizen participation in decisions around reducing emissions?
When I became mayor, I said I don't want to hear the phrase hard to reach communities. There's no such thing as a hard to reach community. We're hard to reach. You've got to flip it around and it's spot on. You've got to take people with you. And one of the things that makes me most proud about our city in London is it's the most diverse city in the world. There are more than 300 languages spoken, but we take people with us by getting them involved in policy formulation, but some of the policies as well. And it's really important we take people with us. And across the globe, you're seeing leaders having to make tough decisions at the same time addressing some of the false information. And we as politicians, I think one of the roles we have is to be teachers. We've got to be a non-patronising way explaining our vision, explaining why we're doing what we're doing, and try and take as many people as we can with us.
I think education is extremely important to make sure that young people understand what's happening and are brought along on this journey. Is London working with schools to make sure that children have a green education and understand what climate action is?
Look, I've just lived through a period of time in our city where, for the first time, everyone is talking about the safety of women, right? Because of the awful murder of Sarah Everard, what we saw happening with Bieber and Nicole, and recently with Sabina. In between one International Women's Day and the next, 118 women are killed at the hands of men. I think to solve the issue of the violence against women and girls, we've got to start in the school. Not just making misogyny, hate crime, harassment of women in the public place criminal offence, invest in the criminal justice system, but teaching boys at school how to treat girls, with respect, healthy relationship. Teaching girls not to change their behaviour because of how boys behave, but actually, making sure we deal with this at a young age. And the same goes in relation to the green agenda, the same goes in relation to racial equality and a whole host of other issues. You've got to start early. You've got to grab the boys early when it comes to how they treat girls. You've got to grab all young people early when it comes to how they treat the planet. And here's the good news. Because of the work we're doing with schools and with young people, we've seen children putting pressure on mum and dad and carers not to drive to school. So the school streets policies we've got in London, more than 400 school streets across London in the first year we did this, rapidly being rolled out. Why? Because teachers are doing assemblies in schools, educating children who are then going home and, inverted commas, nagging mum and dad. They want to scooter to school, they want to walk to school, they don't want to drive to school. And they're really, really important. We've got a big campaign beginning in the next few days, Kickstart across London. We're going to be kickstarting young people to get involved in this. We want children to be planting trees. Since I've been mayor, we've planted more than 340,000 trees. The previous guy planted 170,000, and we're going to plant another 80,000 this autumn. We want children to be planting those trees because they got skin in the game. But if we give them a sense of ownership on this issue, that's really, really important. One of the things that's giving me most hope about Glasgow is the amount of young people protesting and demonstrating outside of the VIP conference centre, and that energy is really important. We've got to hear from them because they're our voters and our constituents, but because they're not just tomorrow's leaders, but they're today's leaders as well.
And does that mean we need younger people to have a vote at a younger age in the UK? In Brussels, they've just said that from the age of 16 and up, you can vote in local elections and European elections. Yeah,
look, I think what we need to do is not just give those aged 16 and above the vote. We've got to improve citizenship education. I think we should have polling stations inside schools. It should be a rite of passage going to vote. All the evidence is, if the first time you're eligible to vote, you vote, you're going to carry on voting. If the first time you're eligible to vote, you don't vote, you may never vote ever. So we have a combination of citizenship education, votes 16, plus polling stations inside schools, it becomes habit forming. The other point I make is this: democracy ain't just about voting once every 4 or 5 years. It's about going on a protest. It's about signing a petition. It's about lobbying your parliamentarian or your mayor or your councillor. It's about joining a political party, a mainstream political party, hopefully the Labour Party. It's standing for public office. It's writing articles, writing letters, getting a blog. That's what democracy is, a vibrant democracy. But voting's an integral part of that.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.